Hey, everybody. Welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kearns.
Dave, I don't really have a did you know. I think it's going to be the whole episode today.
Yeah, this is a special episode, and we're going to discuss the madness
That's right.
of March. And we thought a great way to do this would be go head-to-head with the schools and compare them academically and financially to each other as they're going to compete against each other on the basketball court.
Yeah, there's. I always thought it would be nice to do a highlight of a school and kind of talk about their raw numbers and what we see in a college versus what families and students may be looking like. So I figured, well, there's 68 schools in this big tournament. Start. Why don't we break down all 68 and kind of show families some of the inner workings, or we'll say some of the results that may be surprising as far as some of their statistics.
I think is a great segue too, because the schools you see on TV are often the schools the kids they want to go to first. Yep, and so let's dig into the numbers about the schools that you see on TV, and let's teach you how and where we get the numbers and where we get our information as experts to apply to families.
And the other piece, I know everybody in the world, well, maybe not everybody in the world, but we'll say a lot of men in the country right now, and maybe some wives that enjoy picking schools, their favorite schools, or my kids like picking by the mascots.
Yeah.
Picking a college is important, not from a bracket perspective, right?
Yeah.
But picking a college, and you need to know your stats. And all of the stats that you're going to see today are from the College Planning Network. And this is a resource that, look, we gathered this all together on all 68 schools. But if you're a parent, if you're a student, you can do this same research if you're a member of the College Planning Network. So all of this, there's even more than what we're sharing today.
100%.
But just to give you an idea of what's out there and help guide you in making the right picks, you got to know some stats, just like experts do for basketball. We're going to do from more like an admissions perspective. You'll see some of the numbers, but we're going to compare all 68 schools with the same criteria and maybe make some picks on one over the other. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, if you want to see how this tool works, go to collegeplanningnet.com. And you can become a member right there and figure out how to do all this research yourself.
Are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. So let's get into, we've got the first 4 games. These ones start, I guess they're the play-in games.
Okay.
Let's start. So the first one we're looking at is Howard versus Wagner. Here are some of the first stats we're looking at. Both schools are private. Significant difference in applications. Acceptance rate also, again, very different. You have 30,000 versus 3. You're going to have a lot more rejection letters that come in. The enrollment numbers, so everybody knows what some of these things go, I'm sure we're going to get fast through some of these. So the acceptance rate is how many students are offered acceptance of applicants, right? Yeah. So you see this 35% of that 30,000 at Howard are offered acceptance, but that 35 that was offered, only 27 actually enroll at the school. So that's something also known as the college yield.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a huge number.
Yeah. That's a big deal, because the higher that enrollment percentage, I don't want to use the word prestige.
Yeah.
But that means that the student chose that school. So if that's
over any other school,
if it's a real, like we look at Wagner's 18%, right? So that means that you're talking about 82% of the kids that were offered went to a different school. That's what you have to understand with that. We do have average SAT and ACT scores. That's also very important to understand where you line up. But one of the big changes from these numbers that has happened the past couple of years, and we didn't have this because not all schools reported it.
Yeah.
But how many students actually submitted an SAT? And that number has dropped drastically. So you're going to see higher scores.
Yeah, and I would tell everybody, right? SAT's coming back. So everybody that thinks test optional is here to stay, it is not. It has been debunked across the board, and that is a recent development. But the point that we'll make to that is every score you see on the SAT, ACT is probably inflated based on a small portion of people actually submitting, and the people that actually submitted were the highest scorers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So any surprising numbers that you see here yet? I think 1,200 at both these schools is a little surprising.
Yeah, I'm certainly surprised about that, especially with the enrollment rate percentage, the yield percentage being as low as it is. That's an interesting stat.
Yeah. Next up, we're going to be looking at the student body. So some of my favorite numbers are on this screen. Number 1, the freshman retention rate. Mm-hmm. So again, just to break this down, we won't go into this one every school, but retention rate is simply how many students were enrolled as a freshman and what percentage of that class came back as sophomores.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a very important number that often gets overlooked. Then we just have, what is the full undergrad class size, right? That are full-time students. How big is the school? I like this number. What's the percentage of the student body that comes from out of state?
Yeah, that's obscene.
Yeah.
I've never seen 98% of people out of state.
That's Howard. Right?
That's crazy.
And I kind of like seeing, and this gets back to one of our episodes with Gloria, Dr. Donnelly, about the diversity.
Yeah.
And it's just, if you have everybody coming from one state and all the professors are from that state, like how much are you expanding your knowledge?
Well, and I would dig in on that because I'd want to know how many professors graduated Harvard, how many people are Howard, and how many people continue through that.
Yeah.
And then again, you go into the right after that, the 4-year graduation rate.
4-year graduation rate. Yeah.
So again, not the highest percentages we've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah.
And there will be a couple schools where the schools that have the play-in games, I compared them since they don't have an opponent because we're talking about, we actually have them up against like the state average. Like of all the schools that are in the tournament, the schools that are state schools, what are their averages? So we can see that a little bit later today. So again, kind of give the edge here. I mean, it's hard, Howard, more students, 91% retention rate. But if you have, the same number of students, obviously that percentage, because Wagner's a lot smaller, right? And then you kind of look at the 4-year graduation rate, 64% for Wagner, Howard 53%. It's actually above the average, which is scary. But decent numbers here. But I actually like the fact that Howard's 98% out of state. That was pretty interesting. I think that's something that we would look at. And then finally, for every school, we're going to look at their finances. What's their in-state cost and their out-of-state cost? Any private school, you're going to see that those numbers are the same, because if you're looking at private schools, it doesn't matter if you're in-state or out-of-state, it's the same price. Then we're going to be looking at what percentage of freshmen were awarded need-based aid. What's the average aid package offered? What's the average amount of financial need that a family has that is met by the school? So if you have like a $10,000 need and they give you $5,000, they met 50% of your need. And then what percentage of the school is offered merit? And I'm sure that's one that we will talk,
Yeah, I mean,
about it a little bit
right
too.
off the bat, the one that jumps out is Wagner's not giving any merit-based money.
Mhm.
And Howard's giving almost everybody merit-based money. So is that to insinuate that everybody that goes to Howard is a scholar?
Well, I mean, 1,200 SAT scores. I don't know.
Or is that to insinuate that the $54,000 price is actually not really the $54,000 price?
And that's one of the things that I've kind of started to use the term Coles Cash Scholarship.
Yeah.
Yep. If you're looking at saying 82% of freshmen had financial need and were awarded money, and 94% were awarded merit, and their average package is almost $23,000, you almost look and say, well, they're probably more like a $30,000 a year school. They inflate their price to $55,000 to offer everybody that $30,000, where other schools you might not get anything. And to attract kids.
And again, that's not abnormal. That's what they call financial aid leveraging, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So that's what we got. Any last takeaways? Howard versus Wagner?
Well, the only thing I'll go back to is that yield rate being higher at Howard, right, is probably a direct correlation to the freshman awarded merit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense when you start breaking down the business side of this thing. That's what you get.
Yeah, you got them going up against potentially other schools that offer them nothing. The end price might be the same.
Yeah,
but the mental feeling that you get, I got a $30,000 or I got a $23,000 scholarship from this school. The other schools gave me nothing. They obviously want me.
Yeah,
but if every student gets it, it's not really a true merit-based scholarship. So,
no doubt about it.
All right, let's move on. Next game, the first 4, Colorado State versus Virginia. This one's a little different.
This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, so both are state schools, but as you'll see, Virginia kind of acts
Virginia
a little bit more like a private school.
It's a private school in disguise.
Yeah. Very big difference on the acceptance rate.
Yeah.
91% at Colorado State versus 21%. But then also big shift on the enrollment, right? That yield.
Yeah. And you talk about that 39%. Now you're starting to creep up into that highly regarded. You're looking at that as a big time school that people are actively, if accepted, wanting to go there.
Yeah. SATs and ACTs, again, big difference here. Virginia's over 1,450 is the average. Okay. And Colorado State, under 1,200. And obviously compare that to the acceptance rate.
Yep. You start to see where those numbers come
big
from.
Correlation. Right? Now, and what I want you guys to also take note is look at some of these SAT scores and then see the schools that have a high average SAT score and compare it to what their graduation rate is. So then we get into the student body. Virginia, 97% freshman retention rate. That's a very strong
huge
number. Yep.
Right. People go there, they're happy, they're satisfied, they want to stay. And Colorado State is not bad.
Yeah, 86% for a state school is not bad. Again, but you kind of look at it, they're not that far off as a student body. So these numbers are pretty similar. Kind of surprised. 30%, 30% out of state for Virginia, 33 for Colorado State, and then big difference here on the graduation rate.
And that goes back, and if you compare it to the two schools before, I know we're not supposed to do that in this whole, because we're going match up head to head, but like you talk about 89%, what are they doing differently in Virginia than they're doing at Colorado State? And when we go back and correlate that to the average SAT scores, the acceptance rates, things like that, right? Are they pulling a better crop? Is it a better institution? Is it better lessons? I would argue that you can get a great education anywhere you go, right? But what does it say? And this is where I go back to the inflated SAT numbers and all that stuff, and people thinking that the SATs were there was no correlation between those scores and the outcome, and there is absolutely a correlation.
There was one other piece I was going to mention, but I already forget what I was going to say about these. That's what it was. I've gotten comments on my YouTube page like, no, there's no way that a graduation rate. I made the comment, only 18% of incoming freshmen will have a degree in 4 years. Realize that what we're looking at is the actual 4-year numbers. This is something the College Planning Network has that is different, because if you look at a total graduation rate, you're going to see a different number, because that is based on a 6-year scale. So that's why we were specifically looking at the 4-year number.
Yeah, and in the conception of the College Planning Network statistics, it was the ones that matter. That's what we pulled out for the general public, right? You can go find college search tools anywhere, but your college search tools tell you nothing if they're not specific to this process. And that's what CPN does differently than everybody. It tells you not only the statistics that matter, 4-year rate. I don't know how many parents out there are willing to support their kids going to college for 6 years, but all the ones I've talked to are it's 4 years and I'm done. And then also the financial perspective, which we're about to get into.
So big difference here, right? In-state and out-of-state. I mean, we're at a $10,000 difference between these schools for the in-state, right? $30,000 versus $40,000. The out-of-state cost of Virginia is $75,000. $50,000 for Colorado State. You can see the freshman awarded need-based aid, 34% for Virginia, 48% Colorado State. Average package, pretty significant though for Virginia. And this is what I was saying. They almost act more like a private school when it comes to their aid, because you can see they meet 100% of a family's financial need. Right. And that is significant. So that's
historically a private school type environment.
Yeah. And then you see also, when you see typically very high need met, you're going to see low merit. And that's exactly what you see here.
Yep.
Right. So,
meaning they're giving the merit to the best of the best.
Correct.
Right? That's the approach there. Whereas on the other side, you see sort of like they're giving a lot of merit money out, significantly more, four times more than Virginia.
Right.
But they're not meeting nearly as much need.
Right. I mean, their average aid package is under $12,000. Right. So, and again, what that looks like is if you're coming from out of state and you're looking at Virginia, don't be scared by that $75,000 price tag, because if you go through the planning process and they say you can afford $30,000, they're going to ask you to pay $30,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
They're going to make up that difference. At Colorado State, you're coming from out of state. They say you can afford $30,000. You're probably paying more like 40. Right. Like that's what you take away from this. All right. Next matchup, we've got Colorado versus Boise State. These two, a little different. We've got two state schools, significant difference in the applicants.
And size.
Yep. So enrollment rate and acceptance rate, a little bit on the higher side for Boise State, but I would say both of these schools are not, we'll say, very competitive from the application standpoint. SAT, pretty different, even though their acceptance rates are pretty close, right? 1120 versus 1250.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see what their stance over the last 4 or 5 years was on the test optional environment, because it appears to me as though they were probably a higher test optional environment on Colorado than maybe Boise State was.
Yeah. When we look at their student body retention rate, Boise State 79, Colorado 87. Again, significant size difference between these two schools. Pretty similar in the mix, though.
Yeah, and I go to that top statistic and I start thinking about, okay, well, Idaho versus Colorado, where are they? Are people being happy when they get there?
Sure.
Right. So when you look at those retention rates, the freshman retention rates, like, what is it telling you? That's what we're trying to teach people, how to look at this so that you can extract information that actually makes sense to you. Well, 21% of the people at Boise State are deciding, hey, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And whereas 13% at Colorado. And if you go back to the schools we've already gone through, you can gain knowledge and information from that. Right.
Yeah. I think good mix in-state, out-of-state students between both schools. But then the 4-year graduation rate, Boise State at 38%. That's going to hurt them for my pick.
Yeah.
In this matchup. Looking at the finances between these two schools, in-state, about a $10,000 difference between them. So Boise State a little bit more affordable. Out-of-state, significant difference, a $22,000 number difference. But again, a little bit different on the need, like who gets money, which is surprising because Boise State has a higher percentage, but their cost is lower.
And if you think about that, parlaying it to the last page where we're seeing that freshman retention rate, right? They're doing a little bit of baiting, right? They're getting people to make the choice, and then those people aren't necessarily happy with the choice, but the money was there.
Yeah.
Right. That's how I interpret that.
Yeah. A little bit smaller of an aid package, but again, your
net prices was less from the get-go,
and then
right?
similar merit awards. And again, from an average need met perspective, I mean, they're both, pretty low. Colorado at 72%. I would think that that's a little bit higher for out-of-state students, than in-state, but pretty similar. Any last?
No, I'm starting to just pull information.
Oh yeah, just pulling it all out.
And if you think about this, what we're aiming to teach you guys is how to look at these statistics and actually make sense of them. Right? I can't reiterate that enough because that's what tells you what is actually going on.
Yeah. Our first one, because not every school reports their numbers to Department of Education, and unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot on Grambling.
Okay.
But there may be a reason why some numbers aren't reported. We'll just leave it at that.
No question.
But we take a look at Montana State, 73% acceptance rate, 18% yields, average SAT, just under 1,200. The student body, again, we're not going to see a whole lot of numbers from Grambling here. 38 full-time undergrads, Montana State, a much bigger school, but still 4-year graduation rate at Montana State at only 35%.
Yeah, and that freshman retention rate's a warning sign to me as well.
75,
right?
Yeah.
And that just goes back to how important is it on a location, right? How important is that to people? And what I caution everyone is that I don't care about that. I don't care until you do. Until you do, and then you've got to go through transfer environment and all that, which is tough.
If you're seeing I would say under 85% retention rate, there is something that is there that, and I say this to parents when you visit, if you know the number ahead of time, better be a question you ask
100%
when you visit the school, because if the main reason why people aren't coming back, you find out that answer and it has nothing to do with it, at least now you know.
Yeah.
Right. But you need to know that because, again, you don't want to be wasting time and money by choosing the wrong school. Lastly, we look at some of their numbers. Grambling, financially pretty affordable. In-state and out-of-state is only $30,000, right? You'll see some in-state schools that are over that price. You know?
And what that tells me is in just digging through those numbers, freshmen awarded merit 30%. I forget what the percentage of people out of state was. I don't think they reported it, but that 10-8 takes that 29 down to 20.
Yep.
You're sort of, hey, it's a $20,000 school.
Yeah. And Montana State, again, you kind of look at it, not a very giving school. Only 38 or 37% received need-based aid, and only 67%, only 6% received merit. So I don't see much money coming out of them. But if I got to make a pick here, Grambling, I don't have enough info. I can't feel confident in moving forward with them as the pick. So now we get into the East region, the actual bracket here. We start off with UConn versus Stetson.
Let's do it.
And look at this. So public versus private, significant change in applicants. Stetson, not competitive. If you want to go in, you're probably going to get accepted. 94% acceptance rate, but a very low yield, only 9% of students accept it. And you see a significant difference in the SAT, which again might also play into that very big difference with the acceptance rates. The student body with these guys, good 92% retention rate for UConn, only 68% for Stetson. Which again, the one thing I took away from looking at this was, 68% of the kids come back year two, but at least the kids that come back, most of them are graduating because 59% graduation rate. So if you stick it out there, you're probably going to graduate on time. 72% graduation rate for UConn.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I did not expect that.
And a decent mix in-state, out-of-state. They're both hovering, around that 22 and 25%. Finances, you're going to see big difference here, right? Again, as you most often will with the private
public.
Yep.
Although you look at the out-of-state costs
yeah.
of UConn, right? That's sneaking up into private school territory as well.
And then, look at the aid package difference, though, right? So a lot more students receive. Well, not more because they have a lower student body.
Stetson jumps out to me at Coles Cash.
Yeah, with 93% of financial need met, 83% receives need-based aid.
Yeah,
27% merit. So I guess if you kind of look at it and say, well, this might be a school that as they give you a scholarship and you have financial need, they title it as meeting need.
Yeah.
And then the kids that don't have need, that's the 20. So you kind of, if you added that up, now you're at exactly 100%. So you're right. Yeah, you're right there. So yeah, that might be at 75. It might not be 52 grand that everybody gets.
Yeah.
But I would say nobody's paying 75 grand to go.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Just knowing what we know about the system, like that to me is everybody's getting that 30 G's probably.
And UConn, again, 57% receiving some merit. Actually pretty decent for a state school. But yeah, I'm impressed. I would some of those numbers. Florida Atlantic versus Northwestern. So very different from an applicant standpoint. Acceptance rate, though, the same. This was shocking.
Yeah, they're close.
Northwestern, I would think, would be much more of a
selective school.
Yeah, and turns out not so much. And
what is the size of Northwestern? I would not.
Yeah.
But
very, as far as the acceptance, enrollment, SAT scores, very similar.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
Both these schools. The student body, look at this, 78% retention rate. Northwestern small, under 1,000 full-time undergrads. Decent mix of in-state, out-of-state, but again, I almost give this as a toss-up.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
Well, we'll see on the finance. Finance will do it for me on this one, but I look at the right column there, out-of-state students for your graduation right on the right. Right, you've got a good mix, and you're over 50% on the left. Florida Atlantic, you've got very small out-of-state, and graduation rate. So I'm leaning right now on the Northwestern side of this, but.
And we look at the money though, right? So Northwestern 49,000, which again, not that far off from the out of state at Florida Atlantic, right? 27,000 in state if you live in Florida. Need based aid, yeah, not too far off. The average need met, obviously, big difference here, right? Northwestern meets a higher percentage of family need, but. I would say if I was really comparing these two schools at this point, I'm waiting to see what my award is and what the cost is.
It's certainly
kind of a toss-up. Yeah. So moving along in the bracket, next up, we've got San Diego State versus UAB. I know. Was it UAB that beat Temple, Niall? Yeah. Knocked Temple out. Niall went to Temple, so I'm sure he was upset at that. San Diego State, UAB, two state schools, significant difference in the applicants.
Yeah, wow.
And very big difference in the acceptance rate. San Diego State under 40%, UAB at 87.
I would not expect that.
Yeah.
Other than it's beautiful weather. Right.
Yeah. We don't have numbers on the SAT for San Diego State, but UAB averaged 1,300 almost. That's, again, I would like to see how many.
With that high of an acceptance rate, too.
Yeah.
Which again, if we go back to the very first one, you're talking about the idea that what that tells us and the enrollment rate in there, high acceptance rate, lower enrollment rate, the students are getting into other schools and choosing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like good students.
Yeah.
Right. So, student body, San Diego State, 89% retention, UAB 82. That's a little under my, my line. I like 85 to be the minimum that I typically look at. Decent,
people
decent
are saying
schools.
San Diego State.
Yeah. And again, same in state, like not a big, only 14% for both schools coming from out of state and pretty low grad rates for both.
Yeah.
Looking at the money here, again, pretty similar across the board from an in-state, out-of-state cost. And again, by the way, that cost of attendance number, no, we didn't get in. That's all in tuition, room and board, fees, books, living expenses, by the way.
Yeah, when you go to that bottom line right away to me, every time I see that high merit, right, that's the nobody's paying sticker price for that school. in any way, shape, or form on the UAB side. And that is their financial aid leveraging. That is what drives up their commitment rate. But then also it seems to have a direct correlation to freshman retention.
Right.
You see a high merit, a lower freshman retention.
Yeah. And again, a lower aid package, but they kind of, again, they give it out to almost everybody. It's, it looks good. Looks good on paper. Next up, Auburn versus Yale.
Here we go.
Oh, this is, you're going to have some differences here. So similarly, almost the same number of applicants.
Wow. Look at the acceptance rate.
Acceptance rate, 5% at Yale. But look at that yield rate, 55%.
Yep.
Right. And that's a strong, again, when we talk about those high numbers, that is where you do get that, prestige status.
That is certainly a status indicator.
Yeah. Right. Average SAT at Yale over 1,500.
Average at Auburn's 1305.
Yeah, that's also pretty
surprising.
Impressive. Yeah.
But again, who was reporting?
Yeah.
And over what period of time? These are great numbers.
Yep. So 98% retention rate at Yale, 92% at Auburn. Both impressive. Yale, obviously a much smaller school, much higher mix of out-of-state students, which, again, when you kind of come with that prestige, people from all over the country are looking to come in. But look at the 4-year graduation rate.
Dude, I'm surprised we couldn't take this to the College Board and the schools themselves and just say, guys, look at what you're getting, right? When you see that higher SAT, ACT score, and you see that yield rate increased, you see a better retention and graduation rate.
Yeah, how about it? And then money, obviously, there's going to be a big difference here. So Yale, almost $85,000 a year. Auburn, the out of state, $56,000. Surprisingly, only 25% of freshmen at Yale received need-based aid. Now, the average aid package is huge.
Yeah.
Right. And they meet around 91% of the families meet no merit at Yale, right? You see those numbers of the acceptances, everybody's deserving of it.
Yeah.
The only way you're getting money from Yale is if you have need-based financial aid. And when I see numbers like this, I am sometimes curious how many applicants there assume they won't get anything so they don't fill out the financial aid paper.
Yeah.
Because when I see only 25%, are you telling me that only 25%, that 75% of the students can afford full price?
That's
I think without a doubt, some people just don't go through the process the right way, or they feel like, oh, if I ask for money, I won't get accepted.
Yeah.
That's what sticks out to me with that. And I think Auburn, again, decent state school. Again, you don't see a lot of money coming from state school. I think the 20%, 20% receiving merit, I think they're a school it's not Kohl's Cash. Like they are giving it to deserving students here. Average aid package, 12,000. So surprising both schools there. You think Yale, but it's an interesting matchup there.
It is an interesting matchup.
All right, BYU versus Duquesne, and there's definitely going to be something on Duquesne that I've always looked at here that we're definitely going to look at. BYU, 67% acceptance rate,
77% enrollment.
Yeah.
Well, and we, the whole religious compound there, right? Not compound, but the impact is huge.
Yeah. But that is, like you talk about this prestige, like there are a lot of students that they're applying to BYU. It seems like that's where they want to go.
Correct.
Right. And there's probably a legitimate reason for that. Right. And that's where I would say that there's something at BYU that sticks out to people. Find out if that's for you. Right. Because it's obviously the same for a lot of other people. Again, good SAT scores.
The enrollment rate at Duquesne is really surprising.
Really surprising. At only 11%. Now, they have a high acceptance rate, right? So 88% of the 12,000 applicants are being offered acceptance, right? They're not a huge school, so obviously they kind of know their numbers, right? They're only 5,000. Retention rate at BYU, 89%.
Interesting.
I thought that would be higher with their enrollment, right? Their yields. That was a little surprising. But look at the 4-year graduation rate at BYU.
Wow.
So what is going on there? Everybody wants to go there, but you only got 89% coming back, but only 21%. Maybe they love it so much they want to stay for longer than 4 years. I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Duquesne, 68% 4-year graduation rate. That's not that's pretty actually not bad.
Yeah, no.
But also BYU 63% come from out of state. That was also surprising to me.
Yeah, very surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And then when we look at their numbers, BYU, look at the cost. Very affordable.
There's something there. There's something in the flavor.
Now all of a sudden you look at saying in-state, out-of-state, 21,000. Why is our enrollment 77%? Well, because
bingo.
It's cheap.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you look at it, especially if you compare it to Duquesne.
And they're giving everybody a little flavor.
Yeah, 73% at BYU getting some money, average aid package 76. Now, this is what I was getting to Duquesne. Kohl's cash galore at this school. They have a sticker price of $66,000. If you do look at this, they say 93% of freshmen are awarded merit. It's more like 100%. And that average aid package is pretty much what every single student gets. So if you're looking at Duquesne, ignore the sticker price. You're going to be looking at that mid-30 price range, but realize that when you get that financial aid package that's $30,000, everybody's getting it. It's not special. Don't fall for that trap at Duquesne. I was high on BYU until we started really breaking down the numbers.
Yeah.
A lot of surprising things here, though, but interesting.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it going, well, you can get a deal at both these schools, right? The graduation rate at Duquesne is substantially higher in 4 years. So, like, I got to give it to Duquesne on this one because you're going to pay a reasonable tuition and you're going to graduate, what was it, 60% or so on the 4 year, 55%. So, like, just a better shot there, right? So I got to go Duquesne.
I would only want to look at BYU to see if they're like 5 year, 6 year graduation rate, like where that number actually is.
Are they doing, like, and again, I go back to the religious piece of it, and it's like, are they doing missions and things like that are breaking up, and nobody graduates in 4 years because it's not a thing.
Yeah. And if it's a 5 year that I spend $20,000, I spent $100,000 versus I spent 4 years at Duquesne at 30, 35, I'm spending more, So again, just something else that you have to break down some of these numbers. Looking at Illinois versus Morehead State.
Let's go.
Yeah. Illinois, a whole lot more applicants. Morehead State, only, under 8,000, 84% acceptance rate, 18% yield, 29% yield at Illinois.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And the higher SAT and ACT. So you're getting a large applicant pool. You're quasi restrictive in your acceptance, and you're getting a pretty good yield on enrollment. So people are going for sure. Yep.
Their retention rates, Illinois impressive at 94%, Morehead State only 68%. That is not good.
Yeah, that's an inspection right there. What's going on there?
And then you look at the 4 year graduation rate, 71%. Again, you're talking that high SAT leads to this. You got a school that doesn't report SAT, 4 year graduation rate, 36%.
Yeah. And then the big question on me is going to be money on that one. What is going on monetarily over at Morehead? All
right. Well, but I'll tell you, so Illinois is at 33,000 a year, Morehead State 22. That's in-state. Out of state, Illinois is at 52,000. Morehead State's at 27. So not a big difference. In-state, out of state.
Well, now you start to see why people are going and not coming back.
Awarded need-based aid 75% at Morehead State, which is shocking with the low price, right? 95% of students received merit-based aid at Morehead State. The average aid package was $15,000.
So they're basically cutting their price in half, baiting you to get there, and then people are
right. I mean, and it might be one of those that I choose the cheapest option. We always talk about it's the social, academic, and financial fit, and this might be a perfect case of families focusing on the financial and nothing else, and it's not a social academic fit, and that's why.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't drop the Search Faster technology on the College Planning Network, because Search Faster, FASTR, stands for Financial, Academic, and Social Targeted Research. So when you go on the College Planning Network website, it is designed to give you the information on social, academic, and financial, which is no other system is built that way. So, and this is where all this is coming from.
Yeah. Lastly, just a couple things. Illinois, 72% average need met and 51% receiving merit-based aid. So pretty decent for on their average aid package, almost $20,000.
And their retention rate's high. So they're giving good awards to candidates that deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah. Washington State versus Drake. Sorry, we'll get the graphics to match up here. Washington State, Drake, both private schools, 17,000 applicants for Washington State, 84% acceptance rate, 28% enrollment. Drake's at 8,500 applicants, 67% acceptance rate, 13% enrollment rate. No SAT numbers for Washington State, almost 1,285 for Drake. When we look at their student body, 82% retention rate versus 83, so
sort of
similar.
the same.
Yep. Much bigger school, right? Drake pretty small, only 2,700 full-time undergrads. Lot more out-of-state students, so going to Drake versus only 17% at Washington State. And then the 4-year graduation rate,
substantially higher at Drake.
72% graduation rate.
Correlation to SAT?
Yeah, could be, right? And then we look at their finances. So Drake, again, private, same cost, in-state, out-of-state, $66,000, 69% received aid. Average aid package, pretty significant, but only 78% of need met. That's pretty low for a private school, which, again, I think that you might look and say there might be some Kohl's Cash involved in there, 27% merit, and all of a sudden you add the 27, 69%. What's going on there? But I think that,
and again, it's the retention rate's high enough to where it's, they're doing it well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And any other takeaways from between these two schools, Dave?
No, it's there's always intel in the financial numbers, right?
Yep. Iowa State versus South Dakota State is what we're looking at now. Two state schools. Iowa State, about 2,200 applicants, a 90% acceptance rate, 27% enrollment rate, average SAT just over 1,200. South Dakota State, about 6,300 applicants, 86% acceptance rate, 35% enrollment rate, average SAT 1144. So similar numbers, not too competitive with these schools. Their student body, 86% Iowa State retention, 79% South Dakota. Decent mix of out-of-state students, 38 and 47. 4-year graduation rate, 51 and 42. I think we've got to look at the money here to see which direction I potentially be looking at. And shockingly, South Dakota out-of-state, only 28,000. That's a pretty low number for an out-of-state, especially compared to Iowa State at 40.
Yeah.
And then the rest, financial aid package is similar. Big difference here, 41% of Iowa State students. And that might be one of that, they'll get that 40,000 out-of-state down a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I think you have to comment here. If you look at both of the awards, right, in both of these institutions, you're getting the out-of-state sticker price, but it looks like their packages are going to bring your out-of-state cost very close to your in-state cost. And that's, again, part of the leveraging process, try and get you to go.
Yeah.
And our South region.
The South. Houston versus Longwood. Get into this. So both state schools, significant difference in applicants here. Longwood, not many people apply, but almost everybody gets in, right? But only 13% actually go there. Very low average SAT. Mm-hmm. So again, not a highly competitive school. Right? Yeah, I would say this is non-competitive. When we look at their retention, and then I think it goes right there, only 73% of Longwood students coming back, but then surprising 52% 4-year grad rate. So
it was Houston all the way until that number.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because Houston's 4-year grad rate only 39%. Everybody's coming from in-state at both these schools.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Houston only 2% out of state. Longwood's only 4%. So let's look at really the in-state cost. And then I'm very curious, right? 70% of Longwood students receiving merit-based aid.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that might be school knowing they're not getting the most competitive students, but trying to attract some kids because, again, I think you kind of see almost the students that can't cut it drop out early, but then a high percentage of the kids that remain finish in 4 years. So definitely something to look into if you're looking at that school. Houston, I'd say pretty typical state school numbers here. And again, only 5% awarded merit. Well, what was it? How many kids from out of state? Not many.
Yeah. And I think the other part of that is you have to look at athletics too, right? Because some of that 2% out of state could be athletic money, recruiting money, things like that.
Yep. Yeah. Next matchup in the bracket, we've got Nebraska versus Texas A&M. So looking at this.
Battle of the.
Yeah. So Nebraska significantly less, half the applicants, acceptance rate 79 versus 62%. Texas A&M 45% yields, 45% of kids that are offered acceptance attend.
Yeah, and pretty high scores on both sides for them. I look at the A&M, and that yield rate is a positive for sure. Let's see how many people stay.
So we've got 95% retention rate, right?
You see that high yield, man?
Mm-hmm.
It is almost freshman retention city.
Yeah, and with 50,000 undergrads, right? I mean, that number along, because you'll see high numbers like that, but it's with a campus of 5,000.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something impressive going on here. But
well, and I also look at you got to look at that out of state percentage too.
Yeah.
Right. People are traveling. 25% of the population in Nebraska is traveling to go there. So where are they traveling from? Is it a different culture? Is there something going on there?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas only 4% are out of state Texas A&M. So they're Texas people going to Texas school, and it's obviously a coveted thing in Texas.
Graduation rate's pretty different here too. 46% Nebraska, 61% at A&M. And then the money, well,
money talks.
Money talks. And this might be one of the reasons that you see mostly kids from A&M or from Texas, because that out-of-state cost is $60,000. You know, almost double the cost of in-state. That's a significant bump. So, outside of that, I mean, pretty similar as far as their aid packages, who gets money, how much merit is awarded. Pretty similar.
Yeah.
With that.
I got to go A&M.
I think A&M. I mean, that some of those retention numbers, grad rates, that's where I think you got to go.
Oh, here's an interesting one.
This is definitely an interesting one. Wisconsin versus James Madison, JMU. A lot of people apply to Wisconsin over $60,000. Significantly less at JMU, but a little bit harder to get into Wisconsin. 50% acceptance rate, 77% at
higher
JMU.
yield at JMU, which is interesting. I bet, although if you take the percentage of application, or you take the amount of applications you're seeing.
Big difference in SAT.
Yeah.
Right. Average SAT again kind of goes to the enrollment, right? Like, or the acceptance rate. Like, it's a little bit more competitive, students that are headed there. Then we look at their life, decent numbers from retention, 94, 91. A little bit bigger school at Wisconsin. Out of state, surprisingly, 46 at Wisconsin. That's surprising.
I did not see that.
And then the 4-year grad rate, 72 at Wisconsin, 65%. At JMU.
Wisconsin just ranked up a little bit in my book.
Yeah. Yeah.
The old Badgers, huh?
Yeah. And then another one here that this is, I know JMU is not a giving school.
No, for sure.
And you can see it right here. Only 38% of freshmen given need-based aid. The average package is $12,000, only 8%. Wow. They only meet 37%. So
out of state cost is a little bit steep.
Over $50,000. And I think that to me is a little surprising because of their yield.
Yeah.
Right. Like, they don't really offer money. So, I mean, I know I work with a lot of families that are interested in JMU, and what's going on? What is it? It seems like it's a school that families are willing to pay more to go to. So what is it that's going on there?
And I think, again, Wisconsin does a nice job of probably those out-of-state students getting a nice package to reduce the out-of-state cost more in line with the in-state cost, right? If you just take that 20,000 off the 56, you're at 36 right there.
Yeah.
You know, you're not all that much different.
And 79% need met, pretty strong
good for a state school. Yeah.
Next one we've got Duke versus Vermont. You know, you're going to see some different numbers here. So 50,000 applicants, a 6% acceptance rate at Duke.
Half the applicants, very low acceptance rate versus a higher one, much higher yield.
Look at that yield.
Yeah. We start talking about this. We'll see. I bet freshman retention is 98.
Yeah.
And I have not looked at it, but I'm guessing.
I'm going to say that you're right.
Okay.
Very high SAT. Vermont, impressive, 1,300 SAT, right? But that's 60% yield. That's one of the best.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that is up there. Retention rate. Nailed it, Dave.
Nailed it.
98%.
Hey, and Vermont's not shabby at 88.
88%.
Right? So people are going there happy. They're staying.
Yep. Good
Both
mix.
out of states.
Yeah. 74% at Vermont, 81% at Duke. Again, you would kind of expect it at Duke, but then also look at that 4-year graduation rate.
Yeah, huge.
91%. I'm impressed with Vermont's numbers. up to this point. Then we look at the finances.
Phew, wowzers.
Duke, $91,000 a year. 36% receive need. Again, I think there's some of that. People don't think they're going to get something, but look at that average aid package. Almost $64,000, right?
Making Duke less expensive than Vermont for the right, with the right planning.
Yeah. And they meet 100% of that need. Again, you see Duke only 8% receive merit. It's not a big merit giving school, right? Everybody that goes there, they're very competitive. They don't have to offer merit to kind of attract students in, is kind of what's happening here. But hey, Vermont, decent, aid package, $30,000. I think what you were mentioning, I think some of that goes from the out of state, right? And decent number of families receiving need-based aid. But this is where when you look at these two schools, you're going to tell me that Vermont has 57% of their families that are essentially getting need-based aid versus Duke's only 36 with 91. Some people are missing something in this process when I see numbers like that.
Without question. And I think, you've got the prestige thing, obviously, that Duke puts forth. But at the same time, if the average package is 63, there's probably a whole bunch of people that would get 20 or 30 grand from Duke that aren't even going through the process. Right? And they're overpaying for that institution.
Yeah.
Again, going back to that faster search faster technology with your true cost tool. You go on that collegeplanningnet.com website, you can calculate this stuff as it pertains to your family.
And I think something else just popped in my head, and not to get off topic here, but I think early decision might have something to do with this as well, right? Early decision, when you look at a school like Duke and you say their acceptance rate is only 6%, right? That's across the board.
Yeah.
And so if that's where you want to go, you might be willing to say, I'll do early decision because if I get in, I'm going. But you can limit, if they know they got you, they don't have to offer a lot of money potentially. So I think that also sometimes can play a factor into this. Next up, Texas Tech versus NC State.
Well, that's a good matchup too.
Yeah. Very similar from the applicant pool. Higher percentage acceptance at Texas Tech, but a higher enrollment at NC State.
Yeah.
Better SATs at NC State. Their freshman retention, 94%. NC State, 86 at Texas Tech. Similar, decent size. Again, a lot of in-state situations with both of these. Pretty big difference on the four-year rate. Yeah, 41% at Texas Tech, 65% at NC State. And when we look at their prices, not too far off, right? It's kind of, this is a little surprising, like NC State with, a $23,000 difference between in-state, out-of-state, right? And Texas Tech is only 12. That's a little different.
Yeah.
As far as the merit, I mean, you see 22% merit, 45%. Is NC State offering some money out to people? I mean, their aid packages are similar. The average need met, not too far off.
And if you go to the beginning where the acceptance rate is higher, right? They've got to bring their numbers more in line. They've got to play the financial game to get their enrollment filled. So they're accepting more people. They're offering more money. They're bringing their out-of-state and in-state closer together. They're playing the game of filling the beds, right? And we're not making comment on good or bad schools here. That's not the point. We're digging into the numbers as you should.
Yeah. Kentucky and Oakland. What we got here? Oakland, less applicants. Both schools are non-competitive.
Yeah, non-competitive.
95%, 92% acceptance
Kentucky
rate.
has a better yield.
29% to 22.
SAT scores are in.
Yep. Retention rate, 85% at Oakland, or at Kentucky, 73%. Oakland.
One's half the size, higher 4-year rate.
Yep.
Nothing stands out there to me.
Similar as far as the in-state, out-of-state numbers, and the 4-year grad rate, 52% at Kentucky, 60% at Oakland.
Yeah.
And then money-wise, these two, a little bit different, especially from the out-of-state standpoint, right? $54,000 in Kentucky, $38,000 at Oakland.
Calls cash.
Yeah. I mean, look at the 96% awarded merit at Kentucky, 84% at Oakland. So everybody's getting money at these schools. So obviously I think, again, that might be the out-of-state trying to bring it down to attract some out-of-state students and not have it.
Yeah, they're both trying to fill their enrollments with that number.
Yeah. Next up, looking at Florida versus a play-in winner. So this is the first time what I did was I took all the state schools that are in the tournament and I have their averages.
Okay,
so
perfect.
We can compare what Florida is to all the other state schools in the tournament.
How about Florida? 30% acceptance rate, 41% yield rate.
Mm-hmm. Average 1385 as far as the
Florida's
SAT.
clawing up here. Let's see what we got.
Yep. Retention rate 97. Yep.
People
And
like
a
it.
72% grad rate, you know. Yeah. State average retention rate, by the way, 85. So you know where I came up with that kind of line, you know, that we look at. Out of state students, only 10%, which I thought would be more.
So did I.
At Florida.
Well, that's still a substantial amount of people, but
yeah. By the way, that's state average, 53% for your graduation rate. So you kind of understand where that's at. And then Florida, again, this is one of those schools that does operate like a private school when it comes to their money.
They got money to give. They're giving need-based money. 65% of the people that have need or 65% of the freshmen are getting need packages, and there's some serious merit money on the table too.
Yeah, and they meet 100% or 99% of need. So yeah, I'm going to take Florida over the state average here.
Agreed. Don't be average.
Marquette in Western Kentucky.
Western Kentucky.
So Marquette, private school, double the applicants, acceptance rate, both pretty high. Western Kentucky, not competitive at all. Marquette, 87%.
Reasonable yield, however.
Yeah, 35%. Yeah.
I mean, instantaneously, I'm going to the money.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, so SATs, 12.
And I would bet their 4-year grad rate is low and their retention rate is low.
Let's see. We're going to find out. There you go. 73% retention rate, not reported. 4-year grad rate. So
somebody's onto something here.
Yeah. Marquette, 90% retention, right? 64% out of state from
not bad.
Marquette. And I mean, 24% Western Kentucky, also not a bad number to see. 66% on that grad rate at Marquette. What's it cost? Well, Marquette's at $68,000, right? But they meet around 85% in need. The average aid package is $38,000.
And there's some merit money mixed in there. So you're going to get a package.
And then look at Western Kentucky. Talk about a...
Sell it up,
cash.
sell
there
it up
it
to
is.
sell it down.
Right?
99% freshman awarded merit. So everybody's getting money.
Yeah.
The question is how much?
Yep.
And how much can you appeal for?
That's right. All right. We're almost there. West region. We've got North Carolina versus a playing winner. So this is interesting. North Carolina Chapel Hill is, again, one of those state schools that's like a state private. Significant number of applicants, 19% acceptance rate, 45%.
Tough to get into. People want to go.
Yep. 1,400 average SAT. Their retention rate pretty strong, 97%. 4-year graduation rate at 85%. Only 14%. And that's one where you kind of look at Duke and North Carolina. Like North Carolina's taking more kids from North Carolina.
Yeah, without question.
And Duke is not.
There's, I believe by statute, UNC has to.
And then when we look at the numbers, again, in-state affordable, $25,000, out of state is $53,000. But again, they meet 100% of need. Their average aid package, $17,000. Some merit being offered, but good state school when it comes to need-based aid. So again, I'm going to take
UNC over the average.
Yeah, definitely. Mississippi State versus Michigan State.
Let's see.
So significantly more applicants at Michigan State, but easier to get into as far as acceptance rate goes. Similar yields, similar SAT scores, not that far off between these two. Enrollment or the retention, 89 versus 81. Out-of-state students, more out-of-state students from Mississippi. And grad rate, Mississippi below the average there. Michigan State slightly above at 63%. Finances.
So Mississippi State at 27 in-state, Michigan State at 32.
Yep.
Out of states, 43 for Mississippi, 58 for Michigan.
More freshmen receive need-based aid at Mississippi.
Yeah.
Average aid package almost the same.
Yeah, crazy.
Need met almost the same, but look at Michigan State's merit.
Oh, yeah.
94% of students receive merit-based aid at Michigan State, only 19 at Mississippi State.
And you're, again, Coles Cash City.
Yeah, absolutely. Next matchup, we are looking at St. Mary's versus Grand Canyon. I was interested in this one because two schools that I don't get to research that often. And of course, they didn't have a whole lot of numbers to report, so I was disappointed. 70% acceptance rate at St. Mary's is basically we got 17%. Neither school reported a SAT. When you see that, you're not going to get a whole lot of numbers here. 88% retention at St. Mary's, 66%.
Same size school.
Yep. And then the money, big difference here. St. Mary's, $73,000. no merit-based award. So this is a school that gives out need-based aid. But what jumps out to me, right, the average aid package,
84%.
84% of families receiving need-based aid, that they're giving money.
Yeah, they're certainly giving money, and it's disguised as need.
Yeah, that's kind of what my takeaway here is. Grand Canyon, so they reported they don't meet financial need. Now, this is the opposite of what almost every school does, right? Because schools will give merit-based money, but treat it as if their numbers are 136% of students receive merit-based aid. So the average financial aid package is only $3,300, but they don't classify any of that as need-based aid. So it was kind of like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
Weird numbers there. I got to go with St. Mary's because they have more numbers I could report, but this is when I was looking forward to seeing, it's not ones I get the research and they don't report the numbers to the Department of Education, not in the data set.
Alabama versus College of Charleston.
Yep. So significantly more applicants to Alabama, similar acceptance rate, similar enrollment rate, similar SATs, right? Mm-hmm. So far I got this really as a toss up.
Yeah.
Student body, 80% retention, 87. Charleston's smaller school, good mix. I think both schools from an out-of-state perspective. I'm surprised that 60% of kids at Alabama, like more than half. That was a little surprising. Graduation rates 55, 57. And then basically comes down to the money because I'm still at a toss-up here. And it's still at a toss-up. I mean, it's almost the same across the board.
Alabama's got a little bit of giving going on, though.
Yeah.
I guess they both do.
They both, yeah. I mean, very similar numbers, I think, in what they would be offering from aid packages. So again, if you're applying to both these schools, I'd be shocked if one came with a significant package over the other. So flip a coin on that one for me.
Yeah.
Clemson and New Mexico. We've got a little bit difference here. Clemson, 47,000 applicants, about a 50% application rate. Look at the retention enrollment rate at New Mexico at 39%. That was a little surprising. Yeah. SAT scores that we don't have in New Mexico, but we did have ACT and significantly higher at Clemson.
Yeah.
From that perspective, the retention rate, 94% at Clemson, 68% at New Mexico.
Wow.
What's going on there? And that correlates right to that 4-year graduation rate of 34%. Again, good mix, both schools of in-state, out-of-state, and then money-wise, look at Clemson. Actually, they're
pretty similar.
Similar in their cost as far as the aid.
Clemson's got some merit money to give you, though.
Yes, they do. Look at that. 84% of students receive merit-based aid and an average package of $13,000. New Mexico, not a very giving school.
No.
When we look at them. So I might have to go Clemson over that one.
I think Clemson on that one. Baylor, Colgate. This would be an interesting one.
So Baylor, 36,000 applicants, much higher acceptance rate, harder to get into Colgate, only 12%.
And a pretty high enrollment rate too.
Yeah, with that 31. Much higher SAT
and ACT and 32, yeah.
Yep. And so how does that correlate? Well, more people stay, more people graduate on time. I'm pretty impressed with Colgate's numbers here. 94% retention rate, 76% out of state, 88% graduation. Very strong numbers coming from Colgate. Baylor, not awful, right? 37% out of state, 88% retention rate above the, I'll say about average for private, and a 68% 4-year grad rate. Let's look at the money. A little bit difference here on the sticker price, about a $13,000 difference. More people awarded aid with the school with the lower price tag, but the average aid package significantly more at Colgate, obviously because they meet 100% of need where Baylor's
and Colgate's got a nice little mix of, they meet 100%, but they also got about 25% of people getting scholarships and non-need based money. So I got to go Colgate.
I'm going Colgate with this one. It kind of lines up all across the board.
We should have filled out a bracket
based on this,
based on all of our choices here.
Dayton and Nevada. Dayton. Let's look at this. The 74% acceptance
your
rate.
Typical private public here, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Acceptance rates are high. Yield rates at Nevada are surprisingly high at 38%.
Look at those test scores average, though, and I want to see what does that mean to enrollment or the retention rate, right? 1,000 is the average SAT, 18 on the SAT. That's low.
I'm telling you, they're doing something with their money on the back end. We'll find out when we get there.
So 77% retention rate and a 22%
4-year grad
at
rate.
Nevada. So you don't think SAT correlates and why schools are going to go back to it, that's your answer right there.
Yep.
Right. Dayton, above the Mason-Dixon line on retention, 66%. Again, above that average line, I think, from a 4-year grad rate.
And a good mix of in-state, out-of-state.
45% out of state. And then we look at the dollar amounts. Obviously, state school versus private school. Going to have different numbers here. But Dayton, much bigger packages awarded to about the same percentage of families.
Can we just address it? 87% of Nevada freshmen awarded merit. They're baiting people to go there, and that's where you see. I mean, the correlation has persisted through every single one we've looked at, where a high amount of a merit is awarded. People come, they don't go, they don't follow through and retain, and they don't graduate in 4 years.
And that's, I also say, if your average SAT score is 1,000, chances are you're not getting scholarships from a lot of schools.
Yeah.
And if you apply here and they offer you a $10,000 scholarship, they really want me. They want me even though I'm not the best student in the world. And, well, if you're not the best student, you'll finish on time.
There's more to it.
Yep. Arizona and Long Beach State. What do we got? We've got similar applicants, not too far off. Acceptance rate much higher at Arizona. Long Beach State only 47%, but similar enrollment.
Long Beach, no SAT.
Yeah.
Arizona, 12.4.
And then we're looking at 86%, 87% retention rate. Big difference, though, on the 4-year grad rate. Arizona, 54%. Long Beach State only at 34%. And look at Long Beach State. 99% are coming from in-state.
Yeah.
That is,
homogeneous population.
Arizona, good mix, 44% from out of state. And we look at the dollar amounts. Big difference here on the out-of-state number between Arizona and Long Beach. 60 grand versus 40 grand. That's pretty surprising. And then as far as some money, I mean, looks like Long Beach State meets some need-based aid, but not a whole lot of merit. Arizona, a little bit of a mix between the two.
Good combo there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I got to go Arizona.
Yeah, I think I do too. I mean, that graduation rate just has to rule out Long Beach State. Midwest region, last region, Dave.
Let's do it.
Here we go.
Bringing her home.
So we got Purdue versus
I choose Purdue.
I don't know. State averages. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, versus some state averages, 50%, 53% acceptance rate with 68,000 applicants, 26% yields.
Both yields.
So
they're right at average yield.
Not far off from like an average SAT, right? So I don't want to say Purdue's average, but these numbers,
the average SAT is not 1230. That is just not true. Whatever. Moving on.
92% retention rate. Nice, especially for a state school. Again, state average being 85.
And a big state school. 35,000 is large.
Good mix.
In-state, out-of-state,
Yep.
and a decent 4-year grad rate, right?
Yeah, above, again, average being 53. They're 10 points above that. When we look at their money, in-state out, they're cheaper as an in-state school. They're cheaper as an out-of-state school versus the average. Don't give as much need-based aid. They don't give as much merit-based aid, but their
original price is less expensive, so it's net. You're getting the same. Right?
You get nothing from Purdue. You get $5,000 from another state school. It's the same price out of pocket.
Correct.
And that's ultimately what we're seeing here.
So the price is aligned.
Correct.
The price is in line with what it should be.
Utah State and TCU, similar applicants. Utah State, 94% acceptance. We're going to say that's non-competitive. TCU, a little bit more competitive, 56%. Similar enrollment numbers.
Yeah.
SAT, not that far off, a little bit north of 1,200 for TCU. Utah State, just under 1,200. The retention rate, though, big difference.
Yeah, huge.
75% retention at Utah State, 92 at TCU, and a 73% grad rate. Only 24% for Utah State. So to me, it almost doesn't matter what the next illustration is going to show from a money standpoint. I'm taking TCU on this one. And when you look at TCU, I know they cost more, right? They meet 82% of need and 92% are getting merit. That's a high price tag that they are going to lower.
Yeah, they're knocking that down without question.
And again, with that much higher retention and 4-year grad rate, I'm going TCU here.
Agreed.
Gonzaga versus what's this?
McNeese
State? McNeese State? McNeese.
Or McNeese? I don't know.
Yeah. So nobody enrolls at me. They don't have that. They didn't report that number. But low ACT score. So definitely under the average from what we typically see.
Which I'm going to correlate to grad rate.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Not a lot of applicants.
No.
And let's see what we got from this standpoint. They don't report it, which means it's not good. Something good. Gonzaga 92% retention, 77%
4 year. That tells me there's a good culture there.
And 50% out of state, or a perfect mix in state and out of state students. Looking at the money side, again,
Gonzaga's dropping that price.
Yep, 99% awarded merit, 80% need met, and even McNeese State 80% awarding merit. So
yeah, they're both working to fill their enrollments without question.
Absolutely. So a little bit of Coles cash being tossed around here, but again, I got to give it to Gonzaga. They report all their numbers, and the numbers are strong.
Yeah,
on this matchup here, we got Kansas and Samford. Kansas 88% acceptance rate, Samford 83, 31% enrollment at Kansas. SATs about the same, not significantly different between these two. When we look at their student body pieces, there it goes again. It skipped on me. Oh, we'll come back.
Hold right there.
So 85% retention for Kansas, 91% for Samford. Samford 69% 4-year grad rate, Kansas at 63. Good out of state mix. Or 53, yeah. 72% mix out of state, Kansas 32, which again, state school, I think that's a decent mix there. Then we look at the prices. Average aid package.
So again, I'm just looking at like big picture instantaneously within 7 seconds. I'm going Samford's reasonably priced, and it gives out money. It gives out a variety of money. So it's not overinflating its price tag. It's telling you this is what it costs, and it's going to give you some discounts off of that, right? Yeah. Or so, and I think both these schools are fair in that regard, but I got to give this one to Kansas.
I'm going Samford.
Okay.
Yeah. Just some of those numbers. I liked how some of them matched up. What's important to me, Dave, is where they were up 100%. Top. The free throw percentage is big for me in picking my schools. South Carolina and Oregon. Oregon, a non-competitive school, 93% acceptance rate. But surprisingly, 16% enrollment with that high acceptance. So there's obviously something going on there. Average SAT around 1,200. We don't have one from South Carolina. The retention rate, close, 90 and 87. The grad rate, close, 69 and 61. Out of state, a good mix for both schools. So we're still in a toss up, I think. Then we look at the money. Well, South Carolina gives money.
I got to go South Carolina.
Yeah.
Just because they're not reporting some things, but I'd like to see them report. But they're given merit money, they're given need money, and their price is not the actual 56 out of state that it says.
Yeah,
on that, right.
More people are getting that 16,000 versus at Oregon, right? Like they're getting less money, and they cost essentially a little bit more from out of state. So I think what you're paying out of pocket here at South Carolina would end up being a little bit less, and then all the other metrics that are kind of a toss up. Oh, if I can get something $10,000-$15,000 less per year,
and my kid's going to graduate at a higher percentage graduation and all that.
Yeah,
so
that's what we're looking at. Creighton and Akron, interesting matchup. We've got
your private public, head to head,
yes,
equal acceptance, quasi equal enrollments. Creighton's higher on the SAT, ACT, so Creighton's got it academically right there.
91% retention versus 68.
Need not go further.
Yeah, 70% grad rate in 4 years at Creighton, only 27%, and
Akron.
Creighton 75% at out of state versus only 7% for Akron. So gonna be tough to justify Akron on this slide.
Yeah, Well, and there it is. That's how they get people in there, right? They're using that merit award. Yep. They're giving everybody need. They're giving everybody merit. They're driving their price down, and so they're a price battle.
That's it. Yep. Yeah. And again, I think it's one of those where
and Creighton's not doing a bad job. They're meeting 87% of need. 50% of the people that come get money, and then there's merit on top of it. So Creighton's doing a nice job there.
Yeah. And again, I think it's one of those where it's I think obvious that there's a lot of students that attend Akron because they get it's that merit sucks them in, and it was that's what the students or family focused on was nothing but the finance and not that social and academic fit.
Yep.
Shows in their numbers. And we got Texas versus the state average. Texas, 31% acceptance rate. A little bit tougher to get into there.
I know.
But a 48% enrollment.
So if you get in, people want to go.
Yeah, they want to get in there. But how's that equate? 97% retention rate, 72% 4-year graduation rate. Only 5% come from out of state though. So that's a lot of
Texas.
A lot of Texas. Yeah. A lot of Texans there. In-state, out-of-state costs are above the averages across the board. But you know, again, if they have mostly in-state students, they're not going to be giving out as much.
Yeah.
You know,
and
merit.
They're doing a fair job of pricing. They're not gouging. So I mean, it's a sensible purchase. And and then I would also go like the number I would dig into is of the out-of-state people, what kind of money are the out-of-staters getting? Are they getting that price from 59 down to 49, right? Is it working in their favor?
An 81% need met, pretty impressive for state school.
Yeah.
Without question. So that's a nice number to look at there. And we got Tennessee versus St. Peter's. I believe this is the last matchup that we have. Public versus private. Significant difference on applicants. And look at, St. Peter's non-competitive. 93% not reporting SAT or ACT. Yeah. Tennessee's in line with some of the averages that we see on that side. And then a little bit difference here, 89% retention at Tennessee, only 77% at St. Peter's.
Interesting on the Tennessee side, 89% retention, but a 54% 4-year grad rate. That sort of bucks the what we've seen in some of those higher retention rates.
Yeah.
St. Peter's is more in line, 77% retention with a 47% grad rate.
Yeah. And I wonder, again, is there something at Tennessee? Is there specific co-op programs? Is there something that it's designed to be more than 4 years for some students there? That'd definitely be interesting to see what we got. So, and then lastly, the finances to St. Peter's private. But you can see that 86% received need-based aid. They meet 81%. Their average aid package 37. So that 58,000.
Correct.
Almost everybody.
So again, they're leveraging people in, and then it looks like Tennessee is pretty resolute in their price.
Yeah, they'll give you some need-based aid, but they're not lowering their price tag from a merit standpoint. But you kind of look at some of their numbers, and they don't necessarily need to.
That is the point that I want to make to everybody. Schools that lower their numbers do it because they need to. They need to fill that enrollment. Tennessee is not having a problem filling that enrollment.
Yeah. So that wraps it up. All 68 teams.
Let's go. I'm excited to compare as the next battles come.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what prevails here.
Anything kind of really stick out to you and kind of looking at these numbers, Dave?
I mean, the stuff I think we've reiterated. Number one sticks out to me. That research is the research necessary to make decisions, right? Because it tells you everything you need to know. If you're not spending the time doing the research, use the collegeplanningnet.com, use the search faster technology, use the your price calculator on there and actually figure all this stuff out. But if the merit money awarded is high, the retention rate seems to be lower, the graduation rate seems to be lower, and the SAT score seems to be lower or non-existent. So if it's got a good SAT, if it's got it's going to have a good retention. If it has a good retention, it's going to have a good grad. If it has a good grad, it's not going to give away merit money.
Yeah.
Right.
Good takeaway.
I think the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
It is a business at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing that when you dive into some of these numbers, and again, looking at 68 schools, it shows that some of these schools are playing a business game. And I don't want to say that it's not a scam, but they're doing things that I'll say can manipulate people into thinking they're getting one thing when they might not be. And it might not be the best decision for them. And that's why you have to look at this holistic. I make the analogy, like if you go to a car dealership and the car dealership is trying to sell you a car for $60,000 and they say, there's no discounts. And they say, you know what? I talked to the manager. I got you $10,000 off. You feel like you're the king of the world. And here the MSRP is 35. Right.
You didn't actually win.
You got to do that research beforehand to know where you line up so that you can make the right decisions.
Well, I think the analogy of the Kohl's Cash is real, right? Yeah. It's like, hey, this shirt costs $50, but I got $30 in Kohl's Cash. I'm actually paying $20, and they're going to give me more Kohl's Cash when I buy that thing. And pay attention to the numbers. The numbers matter. Go to collegeplanningnet.com, enroll and get that search faster technology at your fingertips because it gives you all this information. You can compare the 3,500 schools in the country to each other in there. But dig in, research, fortune favors the prepared mind.
Absolutely.
And the only way to prepare is to do the research.
Hope this breakdown of all 68 schools can help you in making the right picks, not for the bracket, but for your future.
All right, guys, that's been College Knowledge Special Edition.
Let the madness begin.